It's home audio time with Mini Amp from Fosi Audio, their latest, the V3 Mono. Let's check out a pair of them, see how they perform. In the home audio realm, I'm not aware of any other company who is as customer-centric as Fosi Audio, always listening to feedback to find out what their customers want and what they can deliver. Their most recent amplifier, the V3 Mono, is currently on Kickstarter. Check out links in the video description. It may be on Amazon by the time you see this video. Lots of audiophile grade components as well as terms like post-filter feedback technology are exciting for those who really like the best in sound quality reproduction. A pair of the V3 Mono amplifiers as well as a power supply was sent to me for this review, but you know I'm going to give you the real feedback. There is no fluff here. So let's take a closer look at the power supply. This thing is a chunky monkey. It says it's 48 volts, 10 amps max. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and I will show you the dimensions coming up. It is big. Also, we have the V3 amplifier. Here we go, V3 Mono. Nice looking overall. The one thing you will notice about this one is it doesn't have a volume control. Well, a lot of amplifiers don't have built-in volume controls. They just amplify the signal. So here on the front, again, very simple. There's a switch on the left side for off, auto, or on. The auto will turn off the amplifier after 10 minutes of no signal. The other two are self-explanatory. Then we have RCA and XLR switch there. Again, that's for your inputs, very self-explanatory. There's also TRS as well. We'll show that here on the back. Here you can see the RCA input, the gain switch, 31 dB or 25 dB, and the XLR combi connector, which again will accept a 1/4 inch TRS as well. Speaker outputs are via a binding post, which will accept about 16 gauge bare wire, or you can do what I prefer to do is use banana plugs. In this case, we use the Stinger Pro Series, along with the 12 gauge OFC speaker cable, also by Stinger. I will leave links in the video description if you'd like to pick any of these up. But yeah, you can see how these fit very nice onto the amplifier. There's also a DC power jack there on the right side, which accepts from 32 to 48 volts. And of course, Fosi Audio included their 48 volt 10 amp max power supply. And this thing is huge. Look at this. This is much bigger than the amplifier. We'll show dimensions coming up here shortly. But it also comes with a breakout cable, which is kind of a Y adapter, which uses the one power supply to power both of these amplifiers. Now, I know your question may be, is this power supply sufficient to run both of these amps? Well, we'll find out during the amp dyno test later in the video. I'll leave you on a cliffhanger till we find out. Dimensions for the V3 Mono, 4.2 inches for the width, 5.6 inches for the depth, and 1.6 inches on the height. And again, the power supply, 7.6 inches for the length, 3.6 inches for the width, and 1.6 inches for the height. As far as specs go, this thing checks off all the boxes, including the Texas Instruments TPA3255 amplifier chip, which in my opinion is one of the best currently available for these mini amps. But if you look at the other specs, they definitely will open the eyes of audiophiles as well. As for ratings for this amplifier, we're looking at 120 watts at 8 ohms or 240 watts at 4 ohms to 1% distortion at 1 kilohertz. So let's get this amplifier plugged into our amp dyno so we can run these tests. If you haven't seen these before, on the left, you'll see the power output in watts. In the middle, the ohm load. On the right, the voltage of the dyno, which you can kind of ignore because it's plugged into our battery bank. We'll also have a clamp here so we can calculate the amp's efficiency.
Hold on to your butts.
For the test, we use RCA input as well as the 31 dB switch, which we showed needed 2.15 volts of input to reach the amplifier's maximum power. Okay, this is with both of the amplifiers just plugged in idle, 0.2 amps, and we're at 125 volts. First up, we're going to run the 8 ohm test. It's rated 120 watts. Again, we're running two amplifiers here, so we're going to show two channels. Here we go, 1% distortion at 1 kilohertz. Can we reach 120? Not quite. 116 and 111, very close. So after this, we decided that we would go ahead and break out the power cable here so that we could put the clamp on it, the flute clamp, so that we could calculate the amplifier's efficiency by finding out how much current was drawn from the amplifier's power supply. So here we go, certified test again. At 8 ohms, we can get about the same output power, 116 and 111, and we'll calculate the efficiency later in the video, so you can stick around for that. Now we're going to run the dynamic power. This sends a pulse tone of 1 kilohertz into the amplifier to find out how much dynamic headroom it has. You can see not much difference here in power, 117, 113, still a little bit shy of that 120. Now we'll move on to the 4 ohm test, where it's rated 240 watts at 48 volts. Again, certified test first to 1% distortion using a 1 kilohertz track, and we did have the kilowatt plugged in. I wasn't sure that it was actually fast enough to capture the current pull accurately, so we're going to do a different method. But 224 and 214, a little bit shy there of that 240 watts that it's rated. So again, we hooked up the flute clamp here using the breakout there, the power supply, 224, 217. And again, we will show the efficiency later in the video. Now, one thing to note, the amplifiers did shut off during this test. I'm going to let you hear what it sounded like. When I say shut off, they actually cycled off and then came right back on. So we ran one amplifier using that big power supply just to find out if there was a limitation in the power supply. And you can see here we got 217 watts, but it never shut down in this particular test. So it could be some kind of a limitation with that power supply that's not able to feed the amplifiers quite enough. But again, we're doing resistive load tests here, which are very difficult on the amp, not the same as speakers. Dynamically, again, we're still shy of that 240 watts, 214 and 205. This amplifier is rated down to 2 ohms, didn't have any ratings, but we're going to try 2.6 ohms first. Here, certified, again using the 1 kilohertz track. Certified test takes us up to 1% distortion. You can see we definitely got that 240, got 271 and 254, but the amp again cycled off and on. So what we did here is we ran one amplifier with that big power supply, and we also had the clamp on, and you can see here, look at this, 306 watts. Wow, that is crazy from this monoblock. So if it has enough juice, these things can actually produce 300 watts each. Here you can see dynamically, we're able to get right at that 300 watts at 2.67 ohms. I know most people in home audio aren't going to use ohm loads this low, but it is interesting to see. Here are the test results I just showed. And one thing to note here is the efficiency on the right at 8 ohms, we got 91%, 4 ohms, 84%, and 2.6 ohms, 82%. If you stick around to the very end of the video, we will show the 2 ohm run, so make sure you stick around for that. For now, let's open up the enclosure to find out what's inside here. Take 2 screws off the back and pull off the front panel here, which has the rails, and there's 2 screws on the bottom, which actually clamp down that TPA chip to the entire heatsink, or to the entire enclosure, which is the heatsink. And here you can see the internals. Right off the bat, we see some names like Nichicon, 2200 microfarad, 63 volts here for the rails of the amplifier. We see Elna here on the input side, which is nice. Elna is a high quality brand of audio capacitor. So overall, we like what we see. And again, they promise Nichicon Japan, WEMA Germany for the coupling capacitors. We see those as well. Also Sumida for the inductors. Those are in the amp. And again, Elna for the audio grade capacitors. It's all here inside the amp. It's actually a lot. These things retail for $129. So in my opinion, it is a lot of amplifier for the money. Now I do have this high-end Sony ES CD player that I've shown in the past that has the balanced outputs with XLR connectors. So I did do this test off camera because I can't play back the music on YouTube without fear of having a copyright strike. So I did this for myself and just kind of to show you guys how cool this XA7 ES CD player from Sony is. This thing is just pretty dope. But for the sound demos for you, we're going to use the RCA input, so let's give it a listen. I know you can't trust the sound quality you're hearing over YouTube, but these amplifiers sounded amazing with these ELAC bookshelf speakers. I was smiling the entire time. Then I thought, why not get ridiculous and hook this up to a dual voice coil 2-ohm subwoofer from Savard, the Elite Series 12-inch. Find out how they do with bass. Woofer test. Now again, this was just for fun, showing that these amplifiers can power a subwoofer, although I would not recommend using them with a subwoofer. They are much better on the bookshelf speakers with the mids and highs. Speaking of highs, let's get out the FLIR camera so we can find out what the high temperature was reached on these amplifiers. And here you can see the exterior. We didn't get much over 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Overall, it did not feel that hot to my hands, obviously, because that's not even as warm as your hand temperature, your body temperature. But it looks very cool, don't it? Looks like Predator. So overall, I was pretty happy with the amplifier's ability to stay cool. Next up, let's talk pros and cons of the V3 Mono. First off, the size, obviously pretty small amplifier. Very powerful using that TPA3255 chip. Sounds great to my ears. Has sound quality components inside, RCA XLR TRS inputs, replaceable op amps, which I didn't really talk about, but we have seen that in other Fosi audio amps. Great efficiency, especially 8 ohms and 4 ohms. Low ohm impedance capability, we'll find out if it'll do 2 ohms at the end. Things to consider: availability right now, it's through Kickstarter only. There's no volume, it is just a gain block, but that's not really a problem. You do need 2.51 volts of input to get the max output, so be aware of that. The power supply is 480 watts max. It would not handle both amplifiers at 4 ohms on the test bench, but I think with speakers it'll probably be fine. Measured versus rated power is a little bit off. Uses a standard RCA jack instead of a panel mount or Tiffany style. And Fosi, can we please get 2 of these in one enclosure with these VU meters? That would be my recommendation on your next amplifier. Again, at the time of this video was Kickstarter only, so check links in the video description. I will update once it's available on Amazon. I do think Fosi Audio is listening to the community, keeps making things better. I'm not saying that just because they sent it to me because I got plenty of amps. I don't need more. I just enjoy testing these things and showing you guys what they actually do. Speaking of what they actually do, this one actually was a little bit overrated from Fosi. I wish they rated 200 watts at 4 ohms. That's more along the lines of the accurate power it puts out. Sound quality is great though, uses excellent components. Think you guys will like it. Till next time, this Big D, I'm out of here. Those who stuck around to the end, make sure you comment. End of the video crew. 2 ohms, let's try it. 1 kilohertz. Let's see what we get here. Again, using both amplifiers with that one power supply, 255 and 239. But then I scratched my head and thought, let's just try one amplifier and find out what kind of power we can get, and check this out. Yo, 370 watts. Wow, I was literally blown away. Efficiency not bad either, not horrible, 77%. So definitely the power supply is a limitation when running these resistive tests. And dynamically here you can see, again, right at 370 watts at 2 ohms. Yo, Fosi Audio V3 monos are kicking it. Big D, I'm out.